Why don't you believe in magic? Magic clearly exists. Life itself, the experience of consciousness, the awareness of one's own experience of existence is magic. By definition, can't explain it. And yet, now at last, we can. And it doesn't remove the magic, it just enhances it. Thomas Aquinas' philosophy that was brought to bear. So science and religion, philosophy. Aristotle built the world. So the world was the universe, as we call it. They called it the world, the whole system of which they were the center. Aristotle built it, and that the stars were immutable. Thomas Aquinas wrote a treatise where nature and God are the same thing, and therefore the examination of nature is the revelations of God. God's work is revealed to you. Your job is to interpret that, but they're nonetheless they're the same thing. Galileo, when he discovered the moons of Jupiter, he realized that Aristotle was wrong. So the stars weren't immutable. So he carried out the philosophy and theology of Thomas Aquinas and discovered something about Aristotle being incorrect. That certainly the wandering stars were not immutable. And then he reached back for Nicholas Copernicus's essay that he'd written, where he'd made this assumption, not asserting that it was right, just making an assumption that it was possible, and said, yes, I think it is. And then the mistake was made, of course, that they believed that the Earth was one of the wandering stars. So that the stars that wandered, so the fixed stars background, wandering stars, they assumed that we were just one of them rather than the dot point center. And so now we can return back to Thomas Aquinas, looking at observations in nature, spiders' webs, photosynthesis, strength of water, plasma lensing, and what is reality. And it's discovered. It's spheres and disks. A sphere supports a disk supports a sphere. In a force-based assemblage model of the universe from the cosmic microwave background, the sphere, call it the observable cosmos, us a dot point at the center. And you have to realize how small we are compared to the massiveness. And in the two dimensions are massiveness and smallness, and we count as smallness. Look at us to the sun. We're teeny weeny compared to the size of the sun as we observe it. So now you just take this new idea that the Earth is the center dot point, observe the sun, and what you're seeing is our mantle, our orbit, its orbit over us. Its surface that we see as a sphere pointing at us is a sphere around us, supporting us, and it's our heat. But because the surface goes through a complete transform, the surface is entirely inverted for the period during which we go through a moment of Planck's constant, that the heat that we emit comes back at us, reflects back at us entirely, plus with a little pulse on it, and that pulse comes from the center. So we see the rigid body and us at the center. Spheres and disks hanging from a thread. Here's a sphere. Take a thread, go to the center, there's a disk spinning there, and it's doing that, it's processing. So it's hanging from the top, a thread, and it's processing at the center. It's processing around the magnetic center of the sphere itself. So the magnetic field of the sphere of the cosmic background is inside. It's the bending moment of the bending moment outside the mass. The concept of the meter 4 from structural engineering. If you have a C-shaped section and you bend it, the center of bending is in the center of the C, outside the mass, and that has an actual effect, and its magnetism, the bending force itself, expresses everything else. So spheres and disks, down to our blood cells. You've now got this disk spinning at the bottom. When you examine it, you find that disk is made of spheres. Objects. You see the sun, and you see objects around it. So the disk is actually made of spheres. Go into that. Oh no, there's a sphere. There's Jupiter. There's Saturn, and it's got discs on the outside of it. So now we've got spheres back to discs again. Okay, so the discs are supporting the spheres. Let's look at that disc. What is that disc? That disc is the ecliptic plane of our solar system, the tilt plane of the whole solar system, upon which each of the planet has its own separate ecliptic plane. But nonetheless, there is an ecliptic plane. So that is now the disc. So the disc is now just the force that's holding those together. So we've gone back to discs again. So we've gone from discs, Saturn, sphere, discs, particles. Look at the particles. Particles are random aggregate chips, and they have a disc formation, keeping each of them. Each particle of the disc of Saturn it counts as a sphere because it's rotating. It has a disc that keeps it attracted to the other ones around it. Disc again. Come out now from the center. You have a disc at the center. Now you've come so small between these two particles that the disc now has to be a sphere. It inflates into a sphere. It cavitates. So you had mass, liquid. This is force in liquid expressing itself. Now cavitates. Becoming a sphere again. That sphere gets bigger and bigger to the outside of the atmosphere. Atmosphere is the meniscus of the magnetic field at the center. It's a skin that builds up that protects the rest of space from this magnetic power. And it's the atmosphere in which we live. That's why it's magic. There's a full transform here of energy back to the disc again. And that's to our red blood cells in our plasma of our blood. So now we've gone from the back sphere. Inside the sphere, the surface, we go back to discs via the transform of the pulsing planet. Pulses our skin, vibrates through, transforms down to a pulse of our heartbeats, creating the red blood cells, cavitations, dot points inside us, inside which that energy expands and pushes back against the compression of the ether from the planetary expansion each moment. Those discs, those red blood cells, are wanting to be spheres. Next step, it's a disc, it's a platelet, wants to be a sphere. How does it become a sphere? You choose to behave as Christ tells you to, recognizing that Christ is God, recognizing that the value of engineering, and that Thomas Aquinas, applying the observations of nature, are the observations of God, and then just translating it through Christ is King as a morality. And you too can do this. So when we choose it as a species, when we choose to live as love, when we choose to be positive, when we choose to be expansive, the red blood cells will be spheres, and the membrane coating will be gold. That's what sets them. That's their rigid body, and that's the golden age beginning, the golden age of knowledge, wonder, truth, justice, and peace. Why wouldn't you want that? Follow the Rebel King.